Welcome to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I am your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. Maybe you've been listening for a while, or this is your first episode. If you like what you hear, would you do us a favor by rating and reviewing us on iTunes? This is a fantastic way to tell us you enjoy what we are creating. Also, if you want more MTSS resources, sign up for our weekly newsletter using the link in our show notes, and check out our website for all the blogs and guides you would ever need about MTSS. Effective coaching is the backbone of building a strong and sustainable MTSS practice in schools. And today's guest brings a wealth of experience into this conversation. So Maria Kolodziej is a veteran educator with over 20 years of K-8 experience, having served as a middle school classroom teacher, K-5 literacy coach, dyslexia-trained reading intervention specialist, and now she's a MTSS coach at the middle school level. And she combines her diverse background to guide teams and foster collaboration and overall implement strategies that support students for their success.
Wow,
Welcome.
That sounds great when you hear it from someone else.
Right? It's always like, oh, okay, I've done stuff.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Well, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, and I also am going to say Maria was chosen as one of our MTSS heroes this year. And so I knew I just had to talk to her about the work that she's doing, especially if she's recognized by her colleagues. So, Maria, I would love for you to share a little bit about what does it mean to be an MTSS coach in middle school? What does your typical day look like?
Well, let me just start off by saying that these MTSS coaching roles in Medina are new to the district. They've never existed before. Last year was the first year that they were put into place. And, you know, it's been a lot of figuring out what this looks like for Medina. And I've had the freedom and flexibility and trust of my bosses to kind of create the systems and infrastructures as I go and find, what's going to work at the middle school level. So it's a lot of meetings. Typical day is a lot of meetings. Typical week overall has a lot of meetings, meeting with teachers in their team meetings, meeting with my department, pupil services, meeting with the building MTSS team after school. Sometimes I get to get in the classroom and do student observations, which is one of my favorite things to do. And just a lot of collaboration with a lot of different people.
I think that that's a really good point. Like the idea that a lot of the coaching role is just being there to collaborate and being a sounding board to those that you're working with. I know I spent some time as an instructional coach, and so there was so much of my role that was just to listen, to kind of be that, to provide advice or insight. Sometimes just to listen. I always ask, do you need me to listen or do you need advice?
Yeah, I love that you said that, because now I'm on year 2 of this role, and it's not my first 2 years of coaching, but it is, my first 2 years of coaching MTSS. And I've found that I need to listen twice as much as I talk. I'm trying to listen more this year and suggest less. So yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you have other coaching experience, so that's always probably good to go into. It may just be a different topic area or different focus that you have, but a lot of it probably is a little bit of the same, just being there to work with the teachers, to support them in their work as they're doing the MTSS implementation. So I want to talk a little bit about coaching, or just even specifically the middle school level, because I know we get a lot of inquiries about what does MTSS look like at middle school or secondary, because it does look different than elementary, because the structure of middle school is different. Students are going to 7 different classes. They don't have a single homeroom. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that might impact the differences in middle school impact the way you approach MTSS in this setting, compared to
Sure.
elementary.
Sure. And it is its own animal, definitely. It's very different than elementary. And a big part of that is the infrastructure around middle school. The kids have so many different classes. And I think that a big part of making this work at the secondary level is working with building admin and school counselors to decide what part of the day is there going to be a specific part of every day that's for intervention, or are the teachers going to have a certain amount of time every week allocated out of their regular classes for intervention, just so long as we're not pulling students from tier one for intervention, because that doesn't make any sense, right? Then they're just going to fall further behind. So that is the first thing I think that's the most important to this role. The other one is how I approach the teachers. So I've been a K-5 literacy coach in an elementary building, and elementary teachers are I think better prepared for intervention in general. Um, you know, that need for intervention is just kind of expected the younger the student is. And conversely, the older the student is, the more we kind of assume that they should have these skills that we're finding more and more they aren't coming to middle school prepared with. So just the way that I approach the teachers is different because their capacity for intervention has not yet been built either in pre-service or with their experience in the classroom. This is quite new to a lot of middle school teachers, and I have to keep that at the forefront of my coaching.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, yeah, like in any of my pre-service training, and any
Mhm.
of the teachers that I worked with, we were trained on a content area, right?
Yep.
We were trained on, I mean, I was trained in literature. So
Mhm.
when I got to teach seventh grade and realizing I had students that struggled with reading,
Exactly.
I was lost because I'm like,
Mhm.
I wasn't taught how to teach reading, and we would lean heavily into our reading specialists or
Mhm.
things like that. And so I do think intervention feels foreign for middle
Mhm.
school. And I love that I mean, you were so kindly like the difference between an elementary teacher and middle school teacher, different personalities in
Yep.
general as well. And I think secondary teachers, middle school and high school, I think struggle with this is that those teachers sort of their classroom is their domain, right?
Mhm.
And so how that collaborative work that happens in middle school
Mhm.
sometimes can feel foreign and feel harder, right? There's
Mhm.
a little more barrier to making that work. And so I'm sure that that changes, how you
Yeah.
approach teachers in making this work.
Teaching middle schoolers is not for the faint of heart, and teaching middle school teachers is certainly not for everybody.
No. I always feel like teachers adapt or like change their personalities to the students that they
Mhm.
teach, right? And so it just is always really funny when you like go into, when I would go up to the high school, like the high school teachers are very different from middle school and
Mhm.
the elementary.
It's
I
wild.
do, yeah, I do appreciate that you talked about how sort of the effort in working with administrators on figuring out when does this intervention happen, because I think
Mhm.
honestly you hit the nail on the head that that is a one of the biggest struggles to making MTSS work at the middle school
Mhm.
level is the time.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what that maybe looks like at your middle school?
Sure. I work with two middle schools. We have two different middle schools in my district, and they approach intervention differently. One of my middle schools has, we call it lab time at the end of every day, eighth and ninth period. And there is a structure set up so that students, they go to, it's like an AB format for reading and math. But that period every day is designated for intervention. The other middle school decided that they wanted to build it into the regular math or ELA blocks. So at that school, their classes are longer, but that's because 15 or 20 minutes of every day ish is supposed to be for no new instruction. We need to revisit this or that, pulling students into groups, enriching, intervening. Yeah, so they each approach it a little differently.
I love that. I think I'm glad that you have two different examples because I
Mhm.
always feel like every middle school context is different. So I knew that maybe our audience would be curious about how they structure that. So, okay, we talked about like kind of working with middle school teachers or just helping them with MTSS. So, what does it look like building and coaching an effective MTSS team? What does that look like? And maybe talk through some dynamics that you've had to work with.
Um, well, again, all of this is still very new. So I don't want to, in any way, shape, or form, make it sound like I have it all figured out or that we're killing it in intervention. We are getting there, baby steps. And I think that I've had to really just be okay with not making all of the kids better year one and not having it all figured out year one, because my personality is very go, 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 very like cross that off the list. Let's get it done. Let's just do it now. But that isn't necessarily where we're at. We have to be solid in our systems and infrastructures. We need a lot more professional development around tier two supports. So I feel like right now, a lot of my work focuses on building capacity for the work. It's almost like, the prebiotic to the probiotic, if you will. Um, yeah, we just need a lot of mindset building and learning to occur. And I wanted to kind of circle back to something that you said, how in pre-service, secondary teachers are trained for their content. And that is very much the case. We, as secondary teachers, think we're teaching a subject. But first and foremost, that needs to be shifted to realize we're teaching kids the subject or the content. And if there is something that we need to do differently or better or outside of the standards, that's okay. And I'm very fortunate to work with principals that have made it very clear that it's okay to step away from your standards or to go off book a little bit if the students need it. And yeah, I think that's a big part of all of this.
Yeah, that's a big structure, right? Because you have this sort of this push and pull of, especially at the middle school level, those state assessments or those
Mm-hmm.
benchmark, like that push to make sure that kids are meeting standard, right?
Right.
And so, and you need to focus on here's the standards, here's the priorities that they need to
Mm-hmm.
learn. Because I know I experienced this, right? And I actually was like a big thing when my first few years as teaching seventh grade English, realizing, oh my gosh, like they have to meet these standards for the state assessment. But the problem is you can't get there unless you also view it through the lens of teaching
Mm-hmm.
students, really
Mm-hmm.
like building those relationships, building that trust, help really understanding where they're starting at
Mm-hmm.
and not assuming, because I think you're right. Like there is that assumption, oh, they're in seventh grade, they've learned this in sixth grade,
Mm-hmm.
but really, understand that's not always the case. And I know like the current crop of middle school students, had disrupted learning early
Mm-hmm.
on. And so, now we're encountering some of that, like seeing how that plays out. And so even more so, we have to really have that idea of like, okay, where are they really at?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do to help them grow? Not have that mindset of what can we do to make sure that they get that benchmark, because they may not get there in 1 year, but you definitely want to see the growth happening.
Well, and even the foundational skills that students need to be successful in school, we're finding more and more they are lacking. And that's one of the areas where building capacity for teachers comes in, because teachers haven't really needed to possess that body of knowledge until, post pandemic. Well, maybe within the last 10 years. But,
Yeah.
if students are coming to you not able to read fluently, no matter what you do to teach the standard, you can, turn around in circles and stand on your head, but they're not going to get it if they can't do
Yeah.
X, Y, or Z first.
Yeah. So are you just talking about foundational literacy or even like academic skills, or also I'd like to talk, are you seeing also that foundational just school skills and just,
Absolutely.
yeah,
All of it. All of it.
all of it. Well, and that kind of leads me to the idea of like some common challenges that maybe you've seen in trying to align some of that, the academic and behavioral supports. So, not only are we talking academics, but maybe also behavior. Is there any
Mhm.
work that you have been doing with your teams around that social, emotional, and behavioral skills support? And what does that look like for your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have adopted at tier one SEL lessons that the teachers are teaching to their home base or their colony class once a week. Um, the lessons were created for the teachers over the summer by an SEL committee, and they're aligned with the standards. But one lesson a week isn't enough. I'm sure you can imagine. It's not like the students like, check that box. Now I understand how to, manage my emotions. So we're finding that the need for small group instruction around SEL and just regular executive functioning is very needed. And we have yet to nail that one down. Our school counselors are incredible, absolutely incredible humans. They care about the kids so much. They run around all day managing uh, just a plethora of things that our students are dealing with. And, to suggest that they should also have the time to see 3 small groups a day for this or that, it isn't there. So we're trying to figure out how to give the students the tier 2 SEL instruction that they need. And we're running into some logistic problems right now. So if any listeners have an answer to that, I'd love, love, love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, because it is a lot, I think I think a lot of times it is very overwhelming, the needs that students do have,
Mm-hmm.
and probably encountering like, oh, it's not just academics, it's SEL, it's
Mm-hmm.
behavior, executive function. I think is a
Huge.
great thing to highlight. And I know we've had guests on our podcast talking about executive function before and how important that is, especially at the middle school level. I
Mm-hmm.
think developmentally that is like such a important time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really love to talk about how are you approaching teachers with this kind of work, of like what kind of professional development are you leading? Like maybe talk a little bit about some of those obstacles that teachers have, or even just like chat, like maybe even the barrier. You talked about capacity. Was there anything else that maybe you've encountered that you're working through with teachers or coaching them through, along with that behavioral and SEL work?
I think that first and foremost, the mindset shift that needs to occur and that I'm trying to build into meetings and professional development is that understanding that just because a student is a chronological age, an 8th grader, that doesn't mean that we can't assume that they have all of the executive functioning skills needed to be successful. And that is work that is fairly new, I think, in the teaching landscape, at least with how much of it we're seeing. And teachers, I think it's just an instinct because they assume that students should know. When you have students that aren't successful and aren't turning in the work and aren't picking up their pencil, it's a natural instinct to assume that they are choosing to not do the work, not succeed. But I think that we really need to keep our conversations centered around they might not be. It might not be a choice. Kids don't want to be in trouble. Kids don't want to be failing. Kids don't want to be, called out in class. So a lot of times, if they could, I believe they would. So how do we build capacity for that? It's a
Yeah.
big, big, big topic that could be 3 more future podcasts.
Yeah. Do you feel like that plays into the buy-in to the MTSS work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think that is the cornerstone, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
And it's going to take time.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've had conversations on our podcast before about the behavioral challenges that teachers are seeing and how that, it's exhausting. And we're seeing a lot of teachers
Mm-hmm.
really have kind of burning out because they're dealing with problems that they have not
Mm-hmm.
been trained in or even
Right.
dealt with in years prior. And so I think that can be really a tough environment for some teachers and really, prevent them from buying into
Mm-hmm.
something that could help maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not in the classroom anymore. So I'm sure that it's difficult to hear me come in and be like, oh, well, all you need to do, have you tried a checklist? And I think that it's natural for teachers to probably be like, if she doesn't understand, she's not in the
Mhm.
classroom anymore. So I really try to keep that in mind when I'm coaching or suggesting. And I also want to be seen as someone that would stand behind the interventions or the strategies she's suggesting. Anything that I suggest implementing, I either have done or would do myself. I will model, I will jump in and show this anytime. I will take your class for a period so that you can take this student to a quiet classroom and retest him or her. Because, yeah, it's got to be a hard pill to swallow to have
Yeah.
this woman coming in and she doesn't have kids anymore. She doesn't have a classroom anymore. It's easy for her to say.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that is isn't something that I ever forget.
Yeah. Oh, I think, I think you sort of named a thing that I think people can have sort of interpretation of coaches, right?
Hmm.
Whether instructional coach, learning coach, MTSS coach, somebody who comes in to maybe help. I think there can be that interpretation of like, they have no idea. They don't have this group of students.
Hmm.
They're not in the classroom anymore. They don't understand. And I think the longer, and I would say this for administrators too, is like the longer you're out of the classroom,
Yeah.
the less you will really understand
Hmm.
because, students change, the environment changes. There's always a factor. And I know that like I was an instructional coach and then I went back into the classroom. And I remember thinking that first semester of like, man, why am I so exhausted? And
Yeah.
like, and just realizing that like a lot of the things that I would have suggested to my teachers, sometimes those are hard to do in the moment, hard
Yep.
to remember in the moment.
Hmm.
Not every student is going to respond to a checklist or, you
Hmm.
know, you have to sort of like continue to put things in your toolbox and be able to use them. And sometimes though, when you're in fight or flight, or if you're in a really stressful situation, you forget about the toolbox or,
Hmm.
there's so many factors that go into the struggles of a teacher. And
Hmm.
it's just really easy to forget what that's like. It's easier to forget what it's like to do it day in, day out. Cause I can go in and watch a classroom, but like to have my own group of students, to
Hmm.
have the responsibilities of the classroom, it's really easy to forget that.
For sure. And I don't want to
Yeah.
forget that it's easy to forget.
Well, I think
um,
that's a sign of a good coach, right? Recognizing, hey, I'm not in your shoes. Here are some ideas. And that takes a lot of work to build that relationship. I would
mhm.
love for you to talk a little bit about what are some things that you're doing to help build that trust and build that relationship with the teachers that you work with as a coach?
um, I try to always bring empathy to the situation. I'm naturally an empathetic person to begin with, but I really try to dial it up when I'm working with harried, stressful, end of year teachers who have done everything they could to get across the state testing finish line. So, and with empathy comes knowing when to back off, knowing when to push for something, and knowing when to say, you know what, let's not worry about this right now. It's not the time. Let's revisit it. I actually just had that conversation with a teacher this week. Let's revisit this down the road.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like when to listen, when to ask questions, when to provide advice, like having sort of that forethought. I think in coaching is really because coaching is really all about helping the person make the decision or take the action, and it's not necessarily about the action that you take as a coach. And so it's like learning how to, and I always think about it. I was like, okay, what does a coach really do? Think about sports coach. Like, what is it that they really do? Motivate, empathize, instruct in some ways, but also be there to like cheer people on as they do the work.
I love the way that you phrased that. Our job as a coach is to help the person take the action or realize what the action even should be rather than giving it to them. And when we started this, and I said that's been a real learning curve for me and my personality type, that's a real thing. And I am still working on that every interaction that I have, because I just want to be like, okay, got it. I got this for you, and just do this and it'll all be better. And that's not going to be received well ever, no matter the time of the school year.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I would love for you to kind of end on if there is any kind of story or student or even just teacher that comes to mind when you think about sort of the success of your MTSS work so far. I mean, I know that you're only a few years into it, and it's that I always feel like there's continual work that will always need to be done in education. I don't think we're ever there yet. So, but
oh no, Larissa, I got the perfect story for you.
Okay.
I didn't even have to think that hard for it. So last year, being my first year in this role, I was not only new to the work, but I was new to the teachers as well. So building those relationships was, really, really important, as it is with our students. And I definitely was more hesitant last year to push when teachers were reluctant, because I didn't want to damage the relationship. But there was a seventh grader last year who I knew would benefit from a DPR, a daily progress report, and having a check-in, check-out system at the end of every period with the teacher, a rating system we developed, his goals, and it was quantitative and beautiful. And when I was proposing this to the team, it was the first time that this has been really done in this way at that school. And there was a lot of reluctance. And I knew it was worth fighting for. And I said, you guys, just please trust me on this one. I really, really feel like this is the way to go and you're going to see results. And they reluctantly went ahead with it. And 6 weeks later, when we followed up, this student's he had surpassed his overall percentage goal. We set him at I think 75%. By the end, we had raised it to I think 90% because he was doing so well. And one of the teachers on the team said to me, I'm a believer now. Those words came out of her mouth. And it was the best moment of that entire school year. You made me a believer. I was like, yes. So my hope is that strategically, if I can have moments like that, use empathy, bring empathy to the situation, know when to push, know when to back off, that those sort of wins are going to pile up and other teachers will hear and it'll be like a ripple. So that's the long game that I'm playing. Yeah. In the moment, the short game, day to day is tricky sometimes, but overall, that's my long game.
I think you're right. You have especially with MTSS, you have to have that sort of long-term vision. You have to be able to see into the future of okay, if we keep doing these things, we may not see immediate quick results. We may see we'll have those small wins, but those add up over time. And then ultimately we will see like students' lives being changed, because that student, that's a huge win for that student. And that the teachers believe that this intervention could work, or they reluctantly like went with it. And that student's life, I mean, that could be a very defining moment for that student. And so I always think about those things of trying our best to really believe that change is possible, and it's always worth a try, even if something doesn't seem like the most,
and that you might not see it at all this year. Next year's teacher might see it, or the high school teachers might reap the benefits of it, but you were a big part of that positive change in that student's life.
And I want to end on this note that you talked about, we may not always see the results. As a middle school teacher, that was one of the hardest things, to believe that the work that I was doing was just a drop in the bucket for the student's career or educational career. And I may not always witness those end results, but I'm a part of the work. And so I think there is a lot of coaching at the middle school level that really has to like lean into, hey, we're a part of this student's journey, and we're going to do the best we can with the time that we have here.
Yeah, so exactly.
Yeah. Well, Maria, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It was a delight to chat with a kindred spirit of middle school. Always happy to talk about middle school. But thank you for all the work that you do, and I know that we love our team at Medina, and all the ways that you all have contributed to the podcast and Branching Minds. So
well, we're trying. We love you guys too. It's been a great addition to our school system.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Branching Minds.